What if your relaxing getaway turned into a chilling descent into a haunted past? Maya only wanted peace, a quiet stay in a countryside Airbnb, but behind one locked door, a child was crying. Whispers echoed through the walls. A room sealed for decades had a story to tell, and a presence waiting to be freed. As Maya uncovers the truth behind a missing girl and the darkness that claimed her, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. Some Airbnbs come with secrets you're not meant to discover. Would you open the door? This isn't just a haunted house story. This is haunted Airbnbs. We've all dreamed of escaping to a quiet place. A cozy cottage hidden in the hills, away from the chaos of the world. That's exactly what Maya wanted when she booked a charming Airbnb in the sleepy village of Elmswood. But what she found waiting behind that locked upstairs door would change everything. It began with a faint cry. Not outside, not a dream. Inside the house, behind the door, a child's sobbing. Soft, broken, and impossible to ignore. And that was just the beginning. As Maya searches for answers, she's pulled deeper into the disturbing history of the Whitmore cottage, a history the town has buried and the locals refuse to speak of. A little girl vanished decades ago. A mother fled, broken by grief. And something stayed behind, watching, waiting. This isn't your typical ghost story. Haunted Airbnbs is a 1-hour slow-burn supernatural mystery that blends emotional depth, suspense, and spine-chilling horror. The story unfolds like an unraveling thread, leading you through rooms soaked in sorrow, forests that close in around you, and the heart of a haunting that is more tragic than terrifying. If you've ever checked into a place that felt a little too quiet, a little too cold, you'll feel every beat of this tale. So, dim the lights, grab a blanket, and listen closely, because the house hears you too. The road to Elmswood was barely more than a thread winding through the hills, hemmed in by walls of dark, whispering trees. The farther Maya drove, the more she felt the weight of the city lifting off her shoulders like shedding an old heavy coat. Her car crawled around another bend, tires crunching over gravel, and then there it was. The cottage sat in a clearing like something out of an old fairy tale, caught between charm and something more solemn. Ivy crept up its stone walls, curling around shuttered windows and choking the rusted iron lantern that hung above the front door. Moss clung to the stone steps, and the garden, once clearly tended with love, was now half wild, with rose bushes that reached like fingers across the path. Maya parked beneath an old oak whose limbs stretched protectively overhead. As she stepped out of the car, the air hit her, cool, quiet, with a faint smell of damp earth and wood smoke. It was late afternoon, and the light had turned golden, bleeding through the branches and shafts that dusted the porch in warmth. She paused for a moment, just breathing it in. A small note taped to the door fluttered in the breeze. "Welcome, Maya. Key is under the left flower pot. Make yourself at home. Mrs. Whitmore." She found the key easily enough, and it clicked in the lock with a sound that echoed just a little too long. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The air inside was still. Not stale exactly, but thick with time. A fireplace stood at the heart of the living room. Above it, a crooked painting of the cottage itself. Oddly accurate, except in the painting, the trees looked closer, hungrier. A set of mismatched armchairs sat like old friends near the hearth, and a grandfather clock ticked faintly in the corner, though it was 15 minutes slow. Maya ran her fingers over the worn banister as she climbed the narrow staircase. The second floor was dim, the light slanting through lace curtains that seemed too delicate to be real. There were 2 bedrooms, one with a carved wooden bed and a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender, the other smaller, with a rocking chair near the window. And then there was the door at the end of the hall. It looked no different than the others, same brass knob, same faded wood, but something about it made her stop. The air felt colder here. The light didn't quite reach this part of the hall. She touched the doorknob. Locked. Maya frowned. She hadn't seen any mention of a locked room in the listing. Curious, she leaned in, placing her ear against the door. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, just as she began to pull back, she heard it. A soft, muffled sob. Her breath caught. She pressed her ear closer. The sobbing stopped. She backed away slowly, heart thudding in her chest. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe the old pipes. Or maybe she was just tired from the long drive and imagining things. That had to be it. Trying to shake the unease, Maya went back downstairs. She unpacked slowly, making tea in the tiny, old-fashioned kitchen where every drawer creaked and every spoon seemed a little too bent. She told herself she'd ask Mrs. Whitmore about the door tomorrow. Maybe it was just a storage room. Maybe. The crying had been an animal outside. An echo. Still, as night fell and the cottage grew quiet, Maya couldn't help but glance up the stairs more than once. The door stayed locked, but something on the other side was waiting. The morning sun poured through the kitchen window like warm honey, lighting up floating specks of dust and catching the edge of a spider's web in the corner. Maya stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, sipping her coffee slowly as she stared out at the fog still clinging to the trees. It should have been a peaceful start to the day, but her mind kept drifting back to the locked door upstairs, and the sound. The crying. She hadn't imagined it. She was sure of it now. It had been too real. Too human. After a quick shower and a bite to eat, she threw on a jacket and stepped outside. The air had a sharp bite to it, the kind that felt more like late autumn than early spring. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she made her way into the heart of Elmswood. The village was small, just one main street lined with low brick buildings, their signs hand-painted and worn. A bakery, a post office, a hardware store that looked like it hadn't sold anything new since the 70s. And nestled between them, all a little cafe with fogged-up windows and a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Homemade scones and fresh brew today." A bell jingled softly as Maya stepped inside. The warmth was immediate, as was the smell. Coffee, cinnamon, and something buttery baking in the oven. A few locals sat near the window, murmuring quietly over newspapers and steaming mugs. Behind the counter stood a young woman with a warm smile and curly red hair pulled into a messy bun. "Good morning. What can I get you?" she asked brightly. Maya ordered a coffee and a croissant, then hesitated. "Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you something." "Sure. Shoot." "I'm staying up at the Whitmore cottage," Maya said casually. "Lovely place, but there's this locked room upstairs. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The woman froze mid-reach for a paper cup. Just for a second. But it was enough. "The Whitmore place," she said, quieter now. "Didn't know anyone still rented that out." "Yeah, found it on Airbnb," Maya replied. "It seemed nice, quaint, but I heard something strange last night. Behind that locked door, like someone crying." The barista's smile didn't return. She handed Maya the coffee with both hands, careful, like it might break. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That house has been through things. Some folks think it should have been torn down a long time ago." Maya frowned. "What kind of things?" The barista shook her head, glancing toward the old men at the window. "I really shouldn't say. Some people in town are superstitious. And the Whitmores, they were good people." Tragedy's just part of the land out here, I guess. With that, she walked away, pretending to busy herself behind the counter. Outside, the town seemed even quieter than before. Maya sat on a bench, with her croissant, and let her eyes wander. The people passing by didn't meet her gaze. A woman walking her dog crossed the street when she saw Maya looking. A man loading his truck paused and gave a quick nod, but no smile. Something wasn't right. Later that day, she found a small bookstore tucked between two antique shops. The sign above the door read, "Thistle and Thread, Books and Curiosities." Inside, the air smelled like old pages and rainwater, and the floorboards creaked with every step. An older man with silver-rimmed glasses stood behind the counter, reading a leather-bound volume. "Looking for anything in particular?" he asked without looking up. "History, actually," Maya replied, wandering toward the back shelves. "Of the town, or of a certain house." That made him glance up. His eyes were sharp, pale blue. "The Whitmore place," she added. "I'm staying there. There's a room upstairs that's locked, and I think I don't know. Something's off." He closed the book slowly. "That house has a locked room for a reason," he said carefully, "and if you're smart, you'll let it stay that way." "What happened there?" He hesitated. "Some things are better left buried. Ghost stories, rumors, children's. Whispers. They become dangerous when you start digging." Maya tilted her head. "So the stories are just that." "Stories?" He looked at her. Really looked at her, and then said something she didn't expect. "Do you believe in echoes?" "Echoes?" "Not the kind you hear in a canyon. The kind that linger in places, in walls, in wood, in silence. Sometimes when something terrible happens, it leaves a mark, a stain, and no matter how many years pass, it doesn't go away. That house remembers." A bell rang as someone else entered the store and the man turned away, ending the conversation. Maya left with more questions than answers. Back at the cottage, the clouds had gathered low and heavy over the hills. The trees whispered more urgently now, and the wind had picked up, rattling the shutters. As she crossed the threshold, she felt it again, that shift in the air, like stepping into another time. The door upstairs was still locked, but tonight she had a plan. She was going to find out what was behind it. That night, the rain came slowly at first, soft drops tapping on the roof like hesitant fingers. Maya sat curled in one of the old armchairs by the fire, staring into the flames as shadows danced across the walls. The room flickered between warmth and darkness, and despite the cozy crackling of the logs, something in the house felt unsettled. Restless. She hadn't said a word out loud since returning from the village. It felt like the house was listening. Her tea had gone cold in her hands. The unease from earlier that day hadn't faded. It had only rooted deeper inside her, growing heavier with each tick of the crooked grandfather clock. It was nearing midnight now. And then she heard it. The crying. It was clearer this time, shaky, breathless sobs like a child trying not to be heard but failing. The sound was faint, but not distant. It was upstairs, behind the locked door. Maya stood slowly, leaving her cup on the side table. The house seemed to grow quieter with every step she took up the staircase. Even the creaking beneath her feet was subdued, muffled like footsteps under thick snow. When she reached the top, she paused in the dim hallway, only lit by a single, flickering bulb. The air here was colder. She could see her breath. The door at the end stood unchanged, yet it somehow felt different, charged with something invisible, like static before a storm. The sobbing stopped. Maya approached cautiously and knelt beside the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Nothing now. just silence. But her skin prickled with the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She whispered, "Hello." Still silence. But then, just as she began to pull away, there was a new sound. A whisper. Right at the edge of hearing. It wasn't coming from behind the door this time. It was in the walls. Maya backed away quickly, eyes darting around. The whispering was faint, like several voices murmuring over one another, trapped behind plaster and paint. A woman's voice. A child, maybe even a man. All too soft to understand, but unmistakably there. She turned and ran downstairs, heart hammering. She needed a distraction, something to ground her. She grabbed her phone, opened a voice memo app, and pressed record. "I don't know what's going on in this house," she said, her voice trembling. "But something is here. I heard crying again, clear as day. And then whispers. In the walls. Not from the locked room this time. From everywhere. It's like the house is talking to itself." The app froze. She stared at the screen as the recording glitched, flickered, and shut down completely. Her phone screen went black. Dead battery. Only it had been fully charged an hour ago. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then held steady. She took a shaky breath and sat down at the kitchen table. For a moment, all was quiet again, except the slow tick of the clock and the wind gently tapping on the windows. Then something scraped upstairs. A dragging sound. Not footsteps. Something being pulled. Maya grabbed a flashlight and crept back up the stairs. Every instinct told her to leave the house, to get in the car and drive until the road disappeared behind her. But she had to know. Something was happening here. Something unfinished. She walked toward the locked door again. This time, the crying didn't return. But the door looked different. Scratched. Thin, shallow lines crisscrossed the lower half of the wood, like someone, or something, had been clawing at it from the inside. The brass handle was smudged. Dull. Slightly turned, Maya reached out and touched the wood. It was freezing. Then, a whisper right behind her. So close she felt the breath on her neck. She spun around. Nothing. But the flashlight flickered violently. The bulb buzzed. And for a fraction of a second, just before it stabilized, she saw something at the far end of the hallway. A shape. Small. Still. Watching her. And then it was gone. The flashlight steadied. The hallway was empty. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, fully dressed, the flashlight beside her, eyes locked on the open doorway to the hall. But the house didn't stir again. Not that night. It waited, and in the quiet, the whispers faded, but didn't vanish. They had slipped back into the walls where they always lived, waiting for someone to listen. The next morning was colorless. Gray clouds hung low over the hills like a ceiling made of smoke. Fog had settled thick across the trees, erasing the distance, swallowing sound. Maya stood at the edge of the cottage porch, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of bitter black coffee, her eyes scanning the woods beyond the garden. The air was still, unnaturally so, as if the world had paused to watch. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the whispers again. Threads of sound just below the surface of silence, unraveling like an old song in another room. And always that presence behind her. The feeling of being watched, of not being alone. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to know what had happened in this house. With a scarf pulled tight and a notebook in her bag, Maya set off into the village, determined to uncover the truth. She started at the cafe again, but the red-haired barista wasn't working. The woman behind the counter today gave Maya a polite, tight-lipped smile and averted her eyes when she asked about the Whitmore house. So Maya walked further down the main street toward a small stone building with a plaque above the door that read Elmswood Historical Society and Public Library. Inside, it smelled like old wood and forgotten secrets. The air was cool, and the walls were lined with shelves full of dusty binders, yellowed papers, and sepia-toned photographs. An older woman sat behind a desk, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose, flipping through a thick volume. Maya approached with cautious hope. "Hi, I'm doing a little research on an old property just outside the village, the Whitmore cottage. Do you have any records on it?" The woman didn't look up. "That place again," she muttered almost to herself. Then, louder, "Back. Room. Second shelf on the left. Look for the binder labeled Elmwood Residences, West Ridge Properties." Maya nodded and made her way down the narrow aisles, each step stirring the scent of mildew and paper. In the back room, she found the binder easily, thick and bound in cracked leather. She pulled it down, brushing off dust, and took it to a nearby table beneath a small window streaked with condensation. She flipped through page after page, deeds, renovation permits, grainy photographs, until one name appeared again and again. Margaret. Whitmore. Born 1947. Widow. Moved into the cottage in 1984 with her daughter, Lila Whitmore, age 6. Maya's stomach turned. The pages that followed were more fragmented. Notes, police reports, newspaper clippings, hastily photocopied. She read in silence. Child disappears in Elmswood Cottage, 1987. Local authorities have launched an ongoing investigation into the sudden disappearance of 6-year-old Lila Whitmore. According to her mother, Lila was last seen playing in her upstairs bedroom before reportedly locking herself inside. Despite numerous attempts, the door would not open. When finally forced open hours later, the room was empty. No signs of forced entry. No footprints, no broken glass. Just gone. The article included a photo, grainy, barely focused, of a dark-haired girl in overalls, one front tooth missing, her smile wide and wild. Lila. Another clipping. Mother claims house is cursed. In the months following her daughter's disappearance, Margaret Whitmore reportedly abandoned the property, claiming the house was alive and had taken her child. She described hearing whispers, footsteps, and the sound of her daughter crying from within the walls. Authorities dismissed these claims as symptoms of extreme grief. The case remains unsolved. Maya sat back, her breath shallow. So it was real. The crying, the locked door, the whispers. She flipped one more page. A note, handwritten, possibly by Margaret herself. "I still hear her, every night, crying for me. I can't go back inside, but someone has to help her. Someone has to open the door." The words trembled on the page. Maya closed the binder and stared at the window. The fog had crept closer, so thick now that the trees outside were only shadows. She could see her reflection in the glass, pale, wide-eyed, tired. But something else, too. Something behind her. She spun around. Nothing. The library was empty. Her heart thudded in her chest like a warning drum. Back at the cottage, the atmosphere had changed again. The warmth from the fireplace felt forced now, like the house was pretending to be something it wasn't. The walls seemed tighter, the corners darker. Every sound echoed slightly too long. Maya laid out everything on the kitchen table. Notes, articles, photos, trying to piece it all together. Lila hadn't run away. She hadn't been taken by a person. She'd been taken by the house. And if Margaret had been telling the truth, Lila was still here, somewhere, in the locked room, or in the walls, waiting. That night, the whispers returned, but they didn't just stay in the walls. They were speaking to her. Not words she could understand, more like shapes, feelings. A current pulling her toward the stairs, and this time, she didn't resist. The wind had picked up. It whistled through the chimney like a warning, a low, steady moan that echoed through the house long after the fire had died. Outside, the trees bent and swayed like they were trying to speak in a language of cracking, limbs, and rustling leaves. The sky was a deep, colorless black, with no moon to soften its weight. Maya stood at the foot of the stairs. Everything she had uncovered, the newspaper clippings, Margaret's desperate note, the whispers in the walls, it all pointed to one place, that locked door. She could no longer pretend it was just a strange part of an old house. Not after last night. Not after hearing her name whispered in the darkness. Not after the dream, or was it a memory, of a small girl sobbing in the corner of a frost-covered room, begging someone not to leave her. There was no turning back. Now, Maya climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath her weight like the house was protesting. The hall was darker than usual, the single bulb overhead flickering so dimly it felt more like candlelight than electricity. Her hand brushed the wallpaper as she walked. It felt damp. The door loomed ahead, silent, waiting. She tried the knob, again, not expecting any change. Still locked, still cold, but tonight she was ready. In her back pocket, she carried a key. Brass, small, with an ornate W etched into the base. She'd found it that morning while exploring the attic, buried, in an old cigar box inside a chest full of children's drawings and forgotten dolls. Something had pulled her up there, a gut feeling, or maybe something stronger, and when she touched the key, she'd felt it. A sudden drop in temperature, the air pressing against her skin like it was holding its breath. Now, she slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The click was deafening. Maya paused, her fingers trembling on the handle. She could feel the cold seeping through the wood like breath on her skin. She pushed the door open. It groaned. The room beyond was still, frozen. Literally. Her breath fogged the air in front of her. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Every surface shimmered with a thin sheen of frost. The wallpaper had peeled in long strips, revealing bare wooden boards beneath, etched with tiny handprints in dust and soot. The windows were shuttered, yet an icy draft swept through the space in slow, deliberate pulses, like the room was breathing. Maya stepped inside. The door creaked and closed behind her. Not slammed. Closed. Quietly. Intentionally. She turned in place, her flashlight beam flickering across the walls. That's when she saw them. Drawings. Hundreds of them. Scrawled in crayon, charcoal, even what looked like soot, covering every inch of the walls. Childlike sketches of trees with twisted branches, of wide-eyed figures, of a house, this house, standing, alone beneath a black sun, and in the center of every drawing, tucked in the corner or floating near the ceiling, was a tall shadow. No face, no features, just black. A presence. Maya's breath quickened. Her flashlight began to sputter. Then she saw it. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden behind a broken rocking horse, a small stuffed bear. Its fur was threadbare, one ear missing, one glass eye hanging by a thread. It sat upright, perfectly still. She approached slowly, crouching beside it. The floor was cold against her knees. She reached for the bear. The moment her fingers touched it, the flashlight died completely. And the room changed. A low hum began, deep and bone-shaking. The temperature dropped further. Ice crept along the walls like veins. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. The ceiling groaned. Then a voice. Small, soft, terrified. "Is it Mama?" Maya turned. Standing beside the bed was a little girl in a nightgown, translucent and flickering like candlelight. Her hair was tangled, her eyes wide with fear and hope. She clutched her arms around herself. Who are you?" Maya whispered. The girl didn't answer. Her gaze shifted past Maya, toward the corner of the room, and Maya felt it. The presence. She turned her head slowly. Something was there. Not a person, not a ghost. A shape. A void. A figure darker than the shadows around it, towering, faceless, and still. It didn't move, but it felt aware. Watching. The girl's voice trembled. "He found me." Maya stood up quickly, the bear still in her hand. "What is it? What does it want?" The girl backed away. "He doesn't like when people come in. He says this is his room." The walls groaned again. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Maya looked at the bear, then at the girl. "Is this yours?" The girl nodded slowly. "Teddy." Maya extended it toward her. The moment the girl's fingers brushed the bear, the room erupted. The shadow shrieked. Not a sound, but a pressure. Like her ears were being crushed from the inside. The drawings on the walls burst into flameless ash, sucked into the air. The bed shook violently. The rocking horse toppled over. The door slammed open, and the girl was gone. So was the bear. Only the shadow remained, pulsing with rage. Maya didn't wait. She ran. Down the stairs, through the hallway, stumbling over the rug and crashing into the door. She flung it open and ran into the yard, gasping for air. The house behind her was dark again. Silent. The wind had died. The fog had lifted. And in the clearing, under the old oak, something had been placed at the base of the tree. She approached slowly. It was the bear, perfectly clean, repaired, as if it had never aged a day. Beside it, carved freshly into the bark, "Thank you." The morning after was unnervingly quiet. Maya sat at the kitchen table, the repaired teddy bear resting beside her like a silent companion. The air in the cottage felt lighter. The heaviness that had settled over the house since her arrival had lifted, as if a window had finally been opened in a room that had been sealed for years. Still, something nagged at her. The locked door was open now. The girl, Lila, was gone. The shadow was not. She thought of leaving. She could pack her things, drive down the hill, and disappear into the world again. Pretend she'd had a strange week in an old cottage and chalk it all up to dreams and stress and grief that wasn't even hers. But the silence of the house no longer felt like peace. It felt like a breath being held. Waiting. Maya rose from the table and went back upstairs, her footsteps slow, deliberate. The door to the room was wide open now. The frost was gone. The drawings had crumbled into piles of dust, and the walls were bare, save for a single thing that hadn't been there the night before. A photograph, tacked to the wall. She stepped closer. It was an old Polaroid. In the faded image stood a woman. Margaret Whitmore, Maya assumed, holding the hand of a small girl who looked just like the newspaper photo of Lila. But behind them, blurry and half-visible, was a figure in the shadows of the hallway. It was tall, slender, and wrong. The shadow. She yanked the photo off the wall and flipped it over. In shaky handwriting were the words, "He came when I locked the door." Maya felt a chill snake down her spine. She sat on the bed that had once belonged to Lila, and let her thoughts spiral. Something had been conjured in this house. Not a ghost, not a simple haunting. It wasn't Lila who had been the problem. It was what came for her. The shadow. It didn't feel like a man. It didn't move like one. It fed on isolation, on fear, on neglect. That room had been locked for years, but Lila hadn't vanished. She'd been trapped, caught in a loop of sorrow and silence, waiting to be heard. And Margaret, her mother, had left. Left the house, left her child behind. Not out of cruelty, but fear and guilt. The kind that rots and festers. Maya stood and returned to the attic. The hatch creaked as she pulled it down and climbed into the dust-choked space. The boxes were still there, most of them untouched, but something pulled her to the far corner. Beneath a tarp, she found an old suitcase, covered in stickers from cities all over Europe. Margaret's. Inside were letters, dozens of them, unsent, and yellowing with time. Most were addressed to "My Sweet Lila." Maya sat cross-legged and read through them, her chest tightening with each word. "I still hear you, every night. I don't sleep, because that's when I see him, standing at the door, watching me. I thought if I left, he'd go, but he never did. He lives in the silence. I tried to forget. I tried to move on, but I see your drawings in every wall. I see your shadow in every mirror. Forgive me." The final letter was shorter. "I locked the door because I thought I was keeping you safe, but I think I trapped you in with him. I'm so sorry, baby. Someone will come one day, someone braver than me." Maya's throat ached. She carefully folded the letters back and tucked them into her jacket. These weren't just apologies. They were confessions. Desperate, painful ones. Margaret hadn't just abandoned the house. She had sealed it, cursed it with her guilt, and left her daughter's spirit to be swallowed by the dark thing that had taken root there. And Maya, by stepping into the house, by listening, by caring, had broken that cycle. She returned to the room one last time. The bed was neatly made now. The frost was gone. But on the windowsill, written in the thin film of morning condensation, was one final message. "You heard me." That evening, Maya packed her things slowly. There was no rush. The house felt still, but not empty. It was watching, perhaps, but no longer waiting. Before leaving, she placed the teddy bear in the center of the room and whispered, "Goodbye, Lila." Then, for reasons she couldn't fully explain, she walked to the fireplace and pulled out the photograph, the one she had taken from the upstairs wall. She tossed it into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, and for a moment, a shape twisted in the smoke. A tall, dark shape. But this time, it wasn't watching. It was leaving. That night, Maya drove down the winding road through Elmswood with the windows open, letting the cool spring air wash over her. The trees no longer whispered. The fog no longer clung. And somewhere, just as she crossed the old stone bridge out of town, she heard it. A child's laughter, soft and distant. Free. The engine purred softly as Maya guided the car through the curling back roads of Elmswood, the tires humming against the damp pavement. Her fingers gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, but she didn't notice. Her mind buzzed with too many thoughts. The truth about Lila, the shadow, the locked room, and the way the house had let her go. Not forced, not chased, not haunted. It had released her, quietly, but it felt unfinished. The woods flanked either side of the road, growing denser as she left the heart of the village behind. The trees leaned inward, tall and gnarled, their branches tangled together like arthritic fingers. Fog slithered low across the road again, thicker than before, hugging the car's wheels like vines clinging to prey. Maya flicked on the high beams. The light caught the mist, and for a moment she swore she saw shapes within it. Tall ones. Still ones. She blinked. Gone. The road narrowed. She checked her phone. No signal. Again. Her GPS spun uselessly, the blue dot frozen in place like it didn't want to move forward. She tapped the screen. Nothing. That was when the car shuddered. Just once. Then, again, the headlights flickered. No, 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 Maya whispered, easing off the gas and coasting to a stop. Steam hissed from beneath the hood. She stepped out into the chill night air, breath fogging instantly. The forest on either side was silent. Not peaceful, but expectant. She popped the hood and was immediately hit with a burst of steam. The engine hissed like it was angry. The radiator hose had split clean down the side. She stared at it, blinking in disbelief. She'd just had the car serviced last week. This wasn't coincidence. Something was wrong. Then, through the trees, just at the edge of sight, she saw it. A light. Flickering, warm, like firelight. Her heart skipped. It was coming from the direction she'd just driven from. From the hilltop, from the cottage. No, she whispered. I left. But the light grew stronger. It wasn't fire. It was the windows. The house had turned its lights on, every window, every floor, glowing golden in the darkness like a beacon, like an eye. Then, as she watched, a shape passed in front of one of the upper windows. Tall. Motionless. The shadow. Maya backed away instinctively, and then her car radio turned on. She hadn't touched it. The volume rose slowly, building static, and then, through the white noise, a voice, faint and whispery. Come back. Maya slammed the door shut. The static vanished. She started walking, not toward the house. Away from it, into the trees. She didn't know where she was going, just that she couldn't stand still. If she stayed, the house would find a way to pull her back. The path through the forest was uneven and overgrown, branches snatching at her jacket, roots curling beneath her boots, but she pressed on, her breath coming in short bursts, her pulse thundering in her ears. Then, footsteps. Not hers. Behind her. She turned, flashlight beam swinging wildly between the trees. Nothing. But the woods moved with her. The deeper she went, the more it seemed the path folded in on itself, looping, repeating. Trees she'd seen before, stones in the same places. She was being led in circles. The house wasn't just behind her, it was around her, a trap. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. Her lungs burned. That's when she remembered the letters, still inside her jacket. Margaret's final words. She stopped, heart racing, and pulled them out. She unfolded the last note, held it tight. Someone will come one day, someone braver than me. She wasn't. Here by accident. She was the end of a cycle, and the house knew. It didn't want her to leave because she had undone something, broken its pattern. But that meant she could escape. She pulled out a match, one she'd pocketed from the fireplace in the cottage, and lit the corner of the letter. It caught instantly, flames curling around the page with hungry crackles. The air around her shifted. The woods groaned, the wind screamed, but the path changed. The trees no longer closed in. The air grew warmer. The fog began to lift. She ran. No longer blindly. She could see the edge of the forest now, where the trees thinned and the stars blinked through. And finally, the road. A distant pair of headlights rounded the corner. A truck. Maya burst from the woods, waving her arms frantically. The driver, a woman in her 60s, braked hard, rolled down the window and leaned out. "You okay, miss?" Maya nodded, barely able to speak. Car broke down. Back there, near the hill. The woman glanced toward the trees. Near the Whitmore place? Maya hesitated. Not anymore. The woman didn't ask any more questions. Iki Mundi just opened the door and drove. From the passenger seat, Maya looked back only once. The cottage sat far away now, perched on the hill like it always had, but its windows were dark, and for the first time since she arrived, they stayed that way. Days passed like drifting leaves, slow and quiet. Maya found herself back in the city, though it didn't feel the same anymore. The noise was louder, somehow more hollow. The crowds moved too fast, the lights too bright. After her time in Elmswood, everything felt artificial, like watching life through glass. She had escaped the house, yes, but a piece of it had followed her. Not in a threatening way, more like a memory she couldn't shake. A presence, quiet and soft, that lingered at the edge of thought. Sometimes at night she still heard the whisper of wind through trees, the click of that upstairs door, a soft child's laugh just before sleep took her, and always she saw the bear. She had thought it was gone, that the house had taken it back. But when she unpacked her jacket, 2 days later, she found it nestled in the folds, clean and whole, as if it had chosen to return with her. She set it on the windowsill of her apartment, overlooking a street full of people who would never believe her story. But she knew it was real, all of it, and the more she sat with it, the more she understood. The house had never been evil. Not entirely. It had been wounded, saturated with grief, silence, and the shadow of something darker, a force that fed on abandonment, on pain, on isolation. Margaret's guilt had kept it alive. Leela's sorrow had given it a voice. But now, there was peace. Still, Maya knew there was one last thing left to do. It was late afternoon when she returned to Elmswood. The sky was soft and overcast, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. She didn't drive up the hill again. She didn't need to. The cottage was behind her now, a chapter closed. But its story, and Lila's, deserved more than an ending. She followed a narrow trail past the edge of the forest where the trees gave way to a quiet meadow dotted with wildflowers. The locals had told her about it once, back when they still talked to her. A place where old spirits were honored and forgotten names were remembered. At the far edge of the clearing, nestled beneath a tall maple tree, was a small, weathered cross, half buried in grass. The name was still faintly visible: Lila Whitmore, 1981 to 1987. There were no toys, no flowers, no candles, just the cross and the wind in the trees. Maya knelt beside it. The bear was in her hands. She didn't speak for a long time, just sat there, listening. The breeze rustled through the leaves in soft, rhythmic waves, almost like breathing. Then she placed the bear gently at the base of the cross. "I'm sorry it took so long," she whispered, "but you're not alone anymore." a pause, and you were never forgotten. The wind picked up for a moment, swirling around her, lifting her hair off her shoulders. It wasn't cold, it was warm, comforting, as if someone small and invisible had wrapped their arms around her just for a moment, in a gesture of deep and quiet thanks. Maya closed her eyes. When she opened them, the clearing felt different, brighter. The shadows had pulled back. The world had exhaled. She stood slowly, her legs stiff, and looked down at the bear one last time. It sat perfectly still, eyes facing the trees, as though waiting for someone else to arrive. Maybe it was. As she made her way back toward the village, she felt lighter, not just physically, spiritually. Whatever darkness had once gripped that house, it no longer had a hold on the world. The cycle had ended. The door had opened. The voice had been heard. And Lila was free. Somewhere beyond the trees. Somewhere the shadow couldn't reach. Epilogue. A week later, Maya logged into her Airbnb account to leave a review, but the listing was gone. No host profile. No photos. No trace the house had ever been available at all. She smiled softly. Then she opened her notebook and began to write. Not just to remember, but to tell the story. Because some truths deserve to be heard. Not sensationalized. Not sensational. Just told. With care. With love. And somewhere in the silence that followed, she thought she heard a child's voice. Soft and distant. Laughing in the wind. The final goodbye, and the beginning of peace. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more haunting tales like this one. Share this with someone who loves a good scare. Have you ever experienced something strange in an Airbnb or hotel? Tell us your story in the comments below. We just might feature it in our next episode.